Welcome back to the 6th week's lectures of Better Leader, Richer Life. In this week's second video, I'm going to talk to you about setting your initial game plan and scorecard for your experiment. As a quick reminder, here's a list of the 9 different kinds of experiments that I described in detail last week. The one you've chosen as the scientist in the laboratory of your life will probably be a combination or a hybrid of 2 or more of these types. I offer them to you mainly to stimulate your thinking about what might be good for you. There is no one best type of experiment. The best kind is the experiment that's best suited to your situation as you've come to understand more clearly through the work you've done in our course so far. By now, you should have chosen the experiment you want to pursue. Keep in mind that you can always do more, but for now, just do one that'll include real actions you can take within the next couple of weeks in the time we have together in our course. I hope and expect, as we'll discuss in our last week of class, that you'll be doing smarter and smarter experiments in pursuit of 4-way wins for a long time to come. You'll get better at conducting fruitful experiments by practicing your skill in doing so. For instance, alumni often say that they're trying new experiments, but they now know, having learned from the failure to do so during the experiment they did during our course, how very important it is to really think through the impact on others and how to get their support. But for now, all you need to do is compose one game plan. Chapter 6 in the Total Leadership book contains details on the elements that your game plan should address. And the instructions in your assignment for this week explain the main elements and then ask you to write briefly about them. Here's a short review. Start by simply describing, in one sentence, what you're going to do, why you're going to do it, and what impact you expect your actions will have. This is the basic idea for your experiment. I find that all too often people don't think enough about the obstacles they'll need to overcome when trying to initiate change, about what might stop you in your tracks. To increase your chances of success, it's useful to be mindful of both the obstacles that might hinder you and the assets that you can draw on for support. Think about this analogy. Before a football game, a coach gathers his players and they analyze the competition, making adjustments to their approach in light of the strengths and weaknesses of the team they are facing that day. Similarly, before you begin an experiment, it's a good idea to think about the obstacles that you may face, as well as the strengths and assets that you can draw on. That's the essence of your game plan. It's also useful to ask why you aren't already doing what the experiment calls for you to do. By asking yourself this question, you'll probably reveal something about the obstacles that you're likely to face. The biggest resistance you're likely to encounter will be internal, inside of you. And that's going to be the hardest part. Your own established mindset and behavioral patterns. Sometimes, however, the resistance will be external, outside of yourself and in your environment. This is why it's necessary to get the buy-in, the support of people around you to move forward on your plan. We'll talk more about this essential leadership skill next week when your experiments are well underway. For now, it's a good idea to think ahead about the help you'll need. And this list will probably change once you get moving. But you will need help. Everybody does. Finally, describe how this is something innovative for you. Ask yourself, how is what I'm planning to do going to stretch me beyond who I currently am? What, in other words, do I hope to learn from this experiment? All right, once you've thought through your game plan, next you need a scorecard to help you document your progress, learn, and specify your next actions. Your scorecard should include your goals for each domain and every domain, all four, and give you a way to gather the information that you'll need to assess your progress in moving toward your goals. Let's look at this template for the scorecard, which you'll complete as part of your assignment for this week. And please do this as soon as possible so that you can start moving on your experiment without delay. The sooner the better. The first column asks you to define your goals for each domain. Your intended impact in each domain at work or school, at home, in the community or society, and for your private self. It's essential that you have a goal for each domain. 2 or 3-way wins are very nice, but to gain the benefit of our course, again, you've got to try for all 4. 4-way win. And as I discussed last week, this impact that you're planning to have, it can be either direct or indirect. An example of direct impact would be organizing a group of work colleagues to volunteer as coaches for a sport at an elementary school where your children are enrolled. You can see that this would be a direct intended impact on all 4 domains. Work, through meaningful connections with your colleagues. Family, through quality time with your children. Community, by helping the school. And self, through better physical fitness. In most experiments, however, there are spillover effects, as I talked about last week. Positive impact that you expect to see from one domain to another. And this ripple effect might occur sometime well into the future. An example of such an indirect effect would be to get more involved in a community activity, such as fundraising for a political candidate, which would also indirectly improve your capacity and your future performance in your career by expanding your range of social contacts, which would eventually, over time, benefit your career. So, let me repeat. For your experiments to be useful, they have to have a goal and a results metric for each domain. If you identify an experiment that doesn't affect your family, however you define family for yourself, which might, for instance, include a pet, either choose another experiment or think about how specifically the intended change might affect your family, even if indirectly. For example, as a manager, you might delegate some part of your work to other people. And this not only builds trust and develops those people, but it might also free up time for your family and, for that matter, for your community and your private time. Again, to gain the value of learning to take the 4-way view and build your skill in better integrating the different parts of life for mutual gain, greater harmony, the intention of each experiment must be for all 4 domains to gain some benefit. The second column of the scorecard asks you to devise practical metrics for your experiments. Why metrics? Well, if you don't measure it, you can't really study it, so you won't learn as much from it. It's that simple. Also, you can't see progress you've made without having some data that tells you whether or not you're making that progress. There's no way to evaluate yourself along the path to your goal without some data. And metrics allow for partial successes and even failures to have real value and meaning because they give you information on which to reflect and learn and grow. In your progress report, which is the last assignment for our course, at the conclusion of your experiments, you'll again complete the 4-way attention chart, giving you another look, a fresh look at how well your actions are aligned with your values, as well as how you feel about how things are going in each domain. So that'll be useful data for you. But now you've got the opportunity to devise metrics that are customized and completely unique to your particular experiment. Part of the creative challenge in the design of your experiment is to come up with useful metrics, data that's helpful for your specific situation. Results metrics can be entirely subjective, or they can be something that you can weigh and measure, observable to others. Both can be useful. The key is to employ metrics that are helpful to you in tracking progress. Very often, it's your own perceptions or the perceptions of other people. A few years back, a student came up with what he called a jerkometer. That's what he called it. That he used to ask his friends to assess his attitude towards them and towards life in general. How much of a jerk am I being? So during his experiment, this is the question that he asked his friends. The point is that you have complete freedom in coming up with any kind of data that you think will be helpful in assessing your progress toward your goals. If it's possible, it's a good idea to see whether there's economic value that is resulting from your experiment. So I encourage you to think about how your experiment affects some financial result, even if it's really small or might not be observable in the near term. Now, it's not absolutely necessary to do this, but I found that it's good to think in these terms, especially so that you can demonstrate the return on investment in doing this experiment to people who care about the financial value you're creating, perhaps people in your business life. For example, reducing commute time by working remotely may result in cost savings and improved productivity. How would you assess this impact? Metrics can be frequently or intermittently observed. Measuring too often, it's burdensome. Measuring not frequently enough can cause you to lose focus. So consider how often it makes sense for you to track yourself and make this explicit in writing up your scorecard. Your metrics can be reported by yourself or by someone else. In many cases, you might be the only person able to keep track of your actions, especially when they're focused internally, like meditating, for example. There may be other cases, though, where it's best to rely on the observations of others. It can be hard for us to see certain behaviors in ourselves that we want to change, and it's easy to ignore or just not see the effects that we have on others. So asking the people around you to report their perceptions of your actions and attitudes is often valuable. Metrics can be quantitative or qualitative. Will you use numbers or words to track your performance? Numbers can reflect concrete behaviors or outcomes, such as the number of contacts you made during a given week, how many pounds you lost, or how much money you saved. And numbers can also be used to quantify less concrete thoughts or feelings, but sometimes words are better. You choose. Metrics can be specific or they can be general. A metric focused on delegating work could be written as whether you delegate work to others, whether you delegate work to others each week, or how many times each week you delegate your report writing duties to others. The latter of these three is better. It's more specific. So once you draft your metrics, take another look and see if you can make them more specific. It'll help you. Be sure you have at least one result metric for each goal. And it's often helpful to have more than one metric for a particular goal, but you don't have to. All you need is one good one. But having more allows you to identify more reliably where you're succeeding and where you're falling short. And so thereby better inform where to allocate more or less of your effort and your attention. Let's look at the third column. The third column on this template asks you to define the action steps that will allow you to meet your goals. These simple details should be clear and very doable, something that you can do now. So, in addition to results metrics, it's useful to note the specific actions you'll take in pursuit of your experiment's goals. Dan, for example, he noted the number of nights a week he was going to read to his children at bedtime. Sally, another student, recorded the number of miles per week she would run. These are simple examples of action indicators that help you and your coaches, who's ever paying attention, to be accountable for moving toward valued goals. There are lots of examples of results metrics and action steps for all types of experiments, both in Chapter 6 of the book and on the Total Leadership website. And I expect to see a wide variety of examples talked about on our discussion forums, too. Share yours, and feel free to ask for help in devising better ones. It's a good idea to tap your network for feedback and ideas to refine your game plan and your scorecard as soon as you can. Doing so can help you to think up creative metrics and split your goals into concrete steps that you'll need to identify. Other people can inquire about whether your metrics are meaningful and help you to create better ones if they're not specific enough or if they're too burdensome. Most of all, your metrics should be easy for you to use. Other people can also provide some helpful pressure to hold you accountable for moving forward on your action steps. The more people who know about what you're up to, and again, the more who know they might benefit from what you're doing, the more likely it is that you will actually do what you say you want to do. You may find some new metrics that allow you to better measure your success towards your goals, or easier metrics to use. Feel free to revise as you go along. Of course, if it's past the assignment deadline, you won't be able to edit your assignments on our site for our course, nor will you get official feedback from your classmates. But that shouldn't stop you from making changes that increase the chances of your success. And you can tell us about these changes in future assignments, where you'll have a chance to describe the progress of your experiment. Okay, let's now turn, in the last of the 3 videos for this week's lecture, to getting in the game and taking action now to start your experiment.